Hey guys, it's Max. Welcome to my step-by-step build guide of my $638 Ryzen 4K video editing PC. Now this build guide is designed to make it very easy for you to build this computer or one like it, even if you've never built one before. We're going to do literally everything step by step. I'm going to show you guys how to install an additional hard drive that I didn't put there in the past and explain a few things as I go along. Along with that, I already built this computer and I just took it apart to make this video. So you see everything's already unpackaged. You guys are going to have to take your parts out of the package yourself, and there might be a few small differences, but overall it should be very close and it should make it way easier for you to set up the system. Now in front of me I have all the parts that I'm going to use. As far as tools, you don't need very much, mainly just a Phillips screwdriver. I have a couple different sizes here, some pliers just in case I need them. One difference is I already took my CPU cooler off, so I have some thermal paste. You'll see me apply it, and you have to do that if you take the CPU cooler off and reapply it, but stock, it comes with paste on here. So that's one thing you guys are not going to have to worry about. So let's go over the parts really quick. I'm going to have all of these parts linked in the video description below so you guys can see what parts I used. And if you haven't yet seen my actual video on how this build performs, I'm going to have a little card that pops up right here. You guys can pop this video or watch that and then come back to it. I have some more explaining in the video about kind of the parts I chose, why I chose them, how it performs, how it compares to other systems. So a very interesting video to watch. Let's take a quick look at the parts. I have my motherboard. I always keep it on top of the box when I'm working on it. That way it's not touching anything. I have the CPU cooler, which is included with the R5 1600 CPU. I have my CPU on here, all the little hardware that came with the computer, the rear I/O shield that is perfectly fit for all these ports, installs into the case. I have a SSD like in the video, as well as a standard hard drive, and I'm going to show you guys what you need to do to install that as well, just in case you guys want more storage. Power supply, RAM, graphics card, and of course the case itself. I also have a couple LED strips here. Those are not really needed, but since we have a window and I wanted to theme it a little bit better, I think I spent $6 or $8 or something like that, under 10 bucks. It's very cheap. So once you have all the parts taken out of the box, the first thing that I typically do is I go ahead and I put my CPU and CPU cooler on here. Now this could vary depending on what cooler you're using. Of course, it's a budget build, so I'm using the included stock cooler. Some coolers will require you to mount something on the back, and then you can either put the motherboard in first and then put the cooler in if it's easier that way, or build it on the box. So this is the way that I'm going to do it. So let's go ahead and start off with that. So the stock CPU cooler actually requires you to remove these mounts over here. These are used for some aftermarket CPU coolers that will mount to them, but the stock one uses a different system. So we're just going to take your screwdriver and unscrew the two screws that are holding each one down and set that apart. I usually keep this just in case later you get a different cooler that you want to swap it out and you might need these. Next, I'm going to take out my Ryzen CPU. So this thing, when you take it out of the packaging, you want to make sure not to touch the top of it because you're going to get your oils on the CPU. So I would touch it by the sides, and also don't set it down anywhere because you have all these different pins at the bottom. And if you bend these pins, that is not good and you're going to damage your CPU. So I'm going to go ahead and lift up on this tab that's down here. As you push it to the side and lift up, and that's going to move open the tray and allow you to install your CPU. And at one of the corners of the CPUs has a little triangle on it. And as you notice, there's actually a little triangle on the socket as well. So that shows you kind of which way to install it. So all you have to do is just really carefully lower it in, and it should drop right in. Now we're going to take this little lever and just set it down, and it should click right back. It shouldn't require any force or anything like that. Now I'm going to apply some thermal paste. So like I mentioned before, the stock CPU cooler will already have a layer on here. I just have to reapply some because I removed this already. So you're not going to need to do this step unless you took it off or you're installing another cooler or something like that. And with this, I'm literally just going to put right in the center a pea-size amount like that. And then when we apply the CPU cooler, it's going to spread that out evenly. And you don't want to apply too much. It's about the most you want to apply because it's going to spread out really thin. You don't want it coming off of the edges. Now we're going to install our CPU cooler. So this is the stock cooler that came with it. So I would have liked to install it this way just because of preference, but then the cable actually wouldn't reach my motherboard. Your motherboard may differ where the CPU fan plug is, and to install it vertically to have the logo be up top, that doesn't work either because of the way the mounts work. So I'm installing mine like this. And then I'm going to route the cable up. So when you're doing this, you want to just be gentle and line up the pins, the screws, to where your mounts, the screw holes are. So I'm going to set it down carefully, and you don't want to be moving it around once you set it down because you don't want to spread that thermal paste around. So line it up as best you can and then just kind of let go. At this point, we're going to grab our screwdriver, and I'm going to just start screwing these in, and you don't want to screw it down all the way, just one at a time, because then it's gonna spread out the thermal paste unevenly. So I'm gonna just go across. So first I screw down that one, then I went across, and I'm gonna go back to this one. And if you see that it's not engaging, you can push down the cooler very lightly to get it to reach. And I'm going to just keep doing it a little bit at a time until it seats all the way and I can no longer screw it down anymore. Now that our CPU cooler is installed, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the cable for the CPU cooler. So that's what we're going to plug the CPU fan into, and that way the system can automatically change the speed of the fan based on the temperature. And it's a 4-pin connection. And we have a 4-pin connection here, and there's a little notch here and a little notch on the connector. So you can only really put it in one way. So just be careful. If it's not coming in, you might have to flip it around, and then it will lock in. Next, I'm going to install my RAM. Now, you don't have to install it right now. You can actually wait until the motherboard is inside of the computer and then install it. So it's kind of a preference. I like to do it this way as long as it's not large RAM that's going to get in the way of me working with the system or screwing the motherboard down, which in this case, it doesn't. So I have 2 RAM sticks here, and there's actually a notch in the center which is going to help guide how to put it in. It looks like it's fairly centered, but it will actually only go in one way, so you can't actually mess it up. As you notice here, we have 4 slots and they're separate colors. So these systems are designed to use either 2 RAM sticks or 4 RAM sticks to get the maximum speed. If you're using just 1 or 3, you're going to get slower speeds. And if you have only 2, you want to install it in the first slot and the third slot. And you see they're black and they match. So in this case, the sticker is going to go closer facing to the fan. Now only these top notches actually open up. These stay the same. So I have these 2 opened. And I'm gonna set it down evenly and press down on this side and then on this side, and as you notice, this closes and locks in. So you know if it was seated properly. So we're done with the motherboard for now. Now we're gonna get the case ready. Here I have the standoff ready that we're gonna install, but first we have to take off the side panels. So there's one on the front and one on the back. I'm gonna go ahead and take both of them out. These actually have thumb screws, so right now it's pretty easy. The first time they're kind of tough. They might just be really tight, so you might need a screwdriver, but the second time shouldn't be. After that, it should be fairly easy. So you want to set these aside. If you have a window on here, it'll have some plastic, so you want to make sure you keep that on until you're done with the build so you don't scratch it up. So the I/O plate or the I/O shield installs very easily. You just push it through, and the metal's kind of bent, so it's kind of springy and it'll kind of get stuck in there. You want to be careful with these because they are not cut very well, or they're kind of sharp on the edges. They're not finished off well. And you want to orient it so that these round circles at the bottom, that's for your speakers and headphones. And then up top, you have this one circle for the old style connection for mice or keyboards. So we're going to line it up with the cutout here. And have a little patience and just push at the bottom, at the top. It does take a little bit of force. So these cases are designed universally to fit a whole range of motherboards. Because of this, for this specific build, we have to remove a standoff. Now, if you have a larger motherboard, you might have to add an additional, couple additional standoffs. To make it easy, they have a little tool that fits in there. So it's just kind of, as you see, you can set this on top and use a screwdriver. So we're going to remove one centered standoff because it touches the motherboard, but it's not needed to screw it down. It kind of gets in the way. So we're going to be moving this central standoff that's all the way over here. As you see, there's nothing on the sides, just this one. And when you set your motherboard in, you'll notice that it kind of touches the edge of it and it doesn't line up with any holes. So that's the way to tell. If you put in the motherboard and nothing aligns with one of these, you kind of remove it. So I'm going to use this tool, set it on top, and it's not tightened too hard. So I'm going to just do that and remove it. So we're going to go ahead and install the motherboard. I like to hold it by the CPU as long as it's not too heavy. You want to have it oriented this direction where you have all these small connectors at the bottom. Your I/O inputs and outputs here, they're going to match into the shield. Now, in most cases, there's actually a standoff that has a little pin that you don't need to screw in, and it just pops through, and that helps you align your motherboard properly. And you can't just set it down because it needs to actually go into the I/O shield. So this is exactly how we're going to do. We're going to set it down carefully. There's not a ton of space here. And then we're going to move it forward. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking off to this side and seeing if it aligns and kind of pushing it in so all the inputs and outputs line up with the actual shield. So if it's not going in, don't force it, and kind of check out what's happening. There we go. So as you see, all these things popped out and came out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the motherboard down, and I'm going to see and make sure the center post matches up. So after your I/O is lined up and pushed through, you'll notice there's a little post here that is popping out higher, and you might have to twist the motherboard slightly, but then as you set it down, it will actually hold it in place and allow you to screw in all the other motherboard holes, and it'll be aligned properly. Now we're going to take some screws out of the bag labeled 6-32, and we're going to screw down the motherboard. So we have 2 up top, 1 over here in the center off to the left hand side, and 2 more at the bottom. So they're just like this, and basically just screw in the screws. I'm going to show you 2 examples of these 2, and then the rest you'll do yourselves. I mean, very basic. I usually just put my finger on the screwdriver and the screw until I can align it. If it's very tight, which it's not in this build, but if you're doing a really small build, you can actually put a little bit of tape across, and that will hold the screw in until you can screw it in. So very simple. You don't want to over tighten it, just enough to hold it down. Alright guys, so next I'm going to show you how to install a regular hard drive. This wasn't in my main build, but if you're doing a budget build and you're using a small drive for all your programs, operating system, which even like 120 gigabyte like this is plenty, you'll want space for storage and other stuff like that. So in order to do that, we're going to have to take off the front of this case. I also want to apologize for any extra noise. It is getting super hot in here, so we had to kick the AC back on, which we usually keep off when we're doing videos because of noise issues. But these type of videos take a very long time to make. So in order to take the front off, I want to do this before I put in the power supply, because then there's a lot of extra cables in this area, and we're going to have to insert this hard drive into one of these 2 slots and screw it in from one side and from the other. Now on the inside here, you're going to see some different pins. You have to actually press down on those pins and then push forward, and that will allow this front to pop off. So let's do that. So I already pushed out the ones on the left hand side. As you see, we have this little clip here. All you have to do really is just press down. You can use 2 fingers and do light pulling on this front. Don't pull too hard, because then you can break it if it's not coming out. That means you didn't press down hard enough. You can actually even do it with 1 finger. So as you see, I'm just going to push down and pull, and the bottom, there we go. And the front is completely off. You're going to go ahead and take off the dust filter. You can set that aside as well. And now we're going to need these M3 little star 5 flat screws. They're the ones that are used for hard drives and SSDs. And we're going to have our hard drive. Now we're going to take our hard drive, and the part with the connections, so this side with your SATA and your power, you want to keep out this way, because we're going to plug in all the cables. And inside of this case, there's 2 sections with a little stand in the middle. So it doesn't matter where you put it in. You can do higher or lower. I'm going to put it in higher, and I'm going to slide it in. Now it doesn't click in or anything like that. You have to use screws. So if you see here, you can move it back and forward until these align. So now as you see the 3 little mounting points on the hard drive, you can see through these little circles here. So we're going to take these M3 5 flats and we're going to screw them in. You don't have to do all 3. I'm just going to do 2 of them on each side because on the other side it's going to be really hard to get that third one either way. Now you probably don't want to tighten it down all the way until you have the other screws in there, just in case the case isn't perfect and the mounting holes don't line up perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and just tighten it down. There you go. This time I'm going to tighten it down all the way. While we're at it, we're going to install the other SSD, or at least mount it to the correct mounting hardware. So here in the case we have 2 mounting points for either 2.5-inch hard drives or SSDs. I'm going to unscrew this little thumb screw. If you see on all of these SSDs, there's 4 mounting points here. What I'm going to do is just set it right on top, and I want the ports, the SATA and the power connection to point backwards, so make sure you do that the right way. And you're going to use 4 of the same screws, the M3 5s. So I'm just going to set this aside for now. Next we're going to go ahead and unscrew this portion here. So this case is designed so you can take this mounting point off, the power supply mounting point, mount up the power supply, and then slide it all in as a whole. It just makes it a little bit easier. We're just going to align the bracket with the power supply, and we're going to use these screws. It's labeled 632 screw hexagon. There's only 4 of them in here, and those are specifically for the power supply. Just going to start them out by hand since I have the room. Should be a little bit easier. Now I'm going to carefully feed all these wires and cables through. This is a cheaper power supply, so all of these are connected. The more expensive ones, like in my other builds, I use modular cables, so you only have to plug in the ones that you need. But since this is a low budget build, we had to save the money and go with a less expensive power supply. So now it's very easy. Just line up where the thumb screws go and screw it back in. So I'm going to go ahead and route the 2 motherboard cables through. We have the 24 pin, the really fat one. I'm just going to push it through this side right here, and then we have the CPU labeled cable here, and there's actually a slot right up here, literally right at the corner of the case, and we're going to carefully just push it through that way, and we're going to flip the case around. So I laid the case down just to make it easier to see, but typically I just do this standing up. So we're going to plug in the CPU cable first. You want these little pins to be facing the edge of the case towards the fan. It's the only way it'll go in. So if it's not going in, you might want to check to make sure it's oriented. And you may not see this because it's really hard to record. You literally just line it up and it should kind of drop in, and then apply a little bit of pressure, and you'll hear it a little bit click. So there you go, it's in. We're going to switch over to the other one now. Now we're going to plug in the 24 pin. This side I'm going to push together. Some of them stay, some don't. Looks like, there you go, it's staying. I'm going to hold it on the side, and literally just plugs in the same way here as well. So here we have a little catch, and that will grab onto the little catch on that side. It's a little bit difficult with the case sitting down. I'm going to lift it up slightly. There you go. So now we're going to plug these in. We have our HD audio here, and that will attach or plug into this little guy in the very corner. And if you notice, there's 5 pins at the bottom, only 4 up top. There's 1 missing. And on this connector, there's the same thing. There's 5 up top and 4 at the bottom with 1 missing. So that's how you know which orientation to connect it. So it looks like we want the HD audio to be facing upwards when we plug it in. So my hand's going to block this here, but it should be fairly easy. All of these cables are labeled, so we have hard drive LED, power switch, and then power LED positive and negative. And so if you look at the bottom, you're going to see everything's labeled. You'll see me plug it in here in a second. And for the ones that aren't labeled positive and negative, like the power switch, if you look at the back side here, there's a little triangle on one side over one of the pins, and that's going to be your positive. So that's how you know. Same thing with this one. So this is almost impossible to record, so you're just going to have to see the labels for yourself and then line everything up correctly. And there we go. And if your power switch isn't working, the first thing I would say to test is make sure that you have this plugged in properly. Now I'm going to plug in the USB 3.0 connection. This case is very claustrophobic for this. The motherboard sits very low, so you have to kind of put a bend in it and then line up the two notches. And I know you don't see this right now, but it's pretty self-explanatory, just like that. You can plug in your SATA drives into any one of the connections. We have 6 connectors on here. Technically 1 and 2 are at the bottom, but just since I'm gonna have 2, I think it's gonna be cleaner coming in this way since we have so much holes routed through there. So I'm literally just gonna click it in. I'm also gonna take our other cable, route it through that same way. This time I'm not gonna route it through that port since our other hard drive is hidden on the back of the case. And click it in, and you guys can hear that click there. Now I'm going to feed our SATA power connector through the same port as we did most of those other cables. That's going to connect into our SSD and power it. Now I'm going to plug in the power and the data connectors on the SSDs. So these cannot be plugged in the wrong way because they have a little notch. So you want to line up the notch. I have to flip this around to plug it in. And then the power, looks like I have to flip it as well. And same thing. Very easy to do. You just set this down, and then it sets in and then slides back to kind of lock in. Then you can grab your thumb screw and just tighten down. Now we're going to plug in the other hard drive. So we need the same 2 connectors. So there you go. That same cable worked. And the SATA connection. There we go. The next thing I'm going to connect is this Molex connector. This is going to power the fans. This just makes it easy. You could unconnect this and undo the wires and take these little pins and plug it into the motherboard if you want to software control them. This way they're just running at full blast, which you do hear them a little bit, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to grab the cable with the matching connectors. There we go. So this other connection, the other SATA power, we also don't need because we only have 2 hard drives and the 1 cable was enough. And our last cable that we have, this is going to be for our graphics card. So this I am also going to grab. I'm going to feed it through where our 24-pin connector was. So this case has this guard that needs to be removed if you want to access or install something or uninstall something. So we're going to remove that. That comes right off. And then we're going to be removing these 2 right here. So most graphics cards take up 2 spots. And these could be saved for later. Just put them back into your motherboard box. All right, so now we have to open up this little notch here for our graphics card. If you just have 1, you're supposed to put it at the top slot. So I'm going to press down on here so it opens up. We're going to grab our graphics card and we're going to carefully put it in so all these ports, all these little connectors should line up properly. And then the pin up front is going to go behind the motherboard. So it doesn't want to sit, you shouldn't sit it on the motherboard, but it's going to fit in right behind it. So as soon as you line in the PCI connectors, carefully press down and you may or may not hear a little click from that connector locking in. And there you go, your graphics card's in. Now these holes may or may not align properly depending on your case and your graphics card. So you may have to grab the graphics card and kind of move it a little bit to give you access so that you can install these. So maybe it'll be a little bit tricky. Now that I screwed those in, we're gonna go ahead and install this cover once again. If you're gonna be swapping out graphics cards, you could just leave it off. It doesn't really do anything. The last thing we have to plug in is our graphics card. This one only takes 1 6-pin connector. So we're going to take this edge here, and we're not going to combine it. We're going to leave these 2 pins off and just align the 2 tabs, plug it in. I'm going to route this and pull it lower, but you want to make sure you don't feed it up so it doesn't hit the fans. So this is just a bonus. I bought these little LED strips just to give it a little bit of red lighting inside. These use the Molex connectors just like that fan did. So one of these I actually placed right here, I think next to one of these channels. And the other one just up here, and it's just your preference. And then obviously I'm not going to show this little step, but the 2 Molex connectors, they actually can piggyback off of each other, and you can just plug it into one of those matching connectors that we use for the fan. So now the build is actually basically done. We're going to pop our dust filter that's magnetic back into its little slot. And I think it actually goes down, and then there we go. And this front panel, also you just line up all those little pins that you pushed out earlier and just lightly press down on them. Bless you, Eddie. Okay, so that is done. And now we're just going to do a little bit of cable management. This case has enough room, so you don't have to worry about having, cables stick out and have to make it perfect. So I'm just going to do a few things. I'm going to grab one of these zip ties, and I think most cases will come with a bunch of these. So I'm going to zip tie this top one just so it kind of stays tucked back here. Zip tie right here. There we go, and then do a final little tuck. All right, now I'm going to grab the side of the case and put it back on. So there we go, looks fairly neat. If we wanted to, we could zip tie something else, but it's a simple build, looks clean. I am going to go ahead and turn on, or put in the other side panel here. Alright guys, so the system is built. Let's go ahead and plug in the power cable. Flip on the power supply. And we have power. So hopefully yours is powering on as well. If it's not, make sure to check that power switch. We actually just tried to turn it on and it wasn't turning on. I actually had it one pin over. So that's probably the biggest thing that could come up. So now after this point, you can actually plug in your keyboard, monitor, mouse, and let's go ahead and do the Windows installation. So I'm going to take this next section out of my previous Ryzen build guide, which is very similar parts, same motherboard, and everything works exactly the same, just so I don't have to reshoot all of that because it's identical. And once you get through that, you'll have your system set up. So now you need to get your Windows 10 USB or disk. Of course, if you have a disk, you're going to have to use a disk drive. I don't have a USB. Like if you buy Windows 10, it can come on a USB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one, which Microsoft allows you to do really easily. So you're going to need a USB that is at least 4 gigs in size. Mine is a 16 gig. And then do a Google search for Windows 10 USB tool. And we're going to go to the top option. And we're going to download the Windows 10 USB tool. So it's very nice to make it easy. This way, if you have a serial code for Windows 10 from a different computer or a previous build, you can use it like I'm going to do. Or if you just want to buy one online for like a lower price on like cdkey.com or one of the other sites that are legitimate but give you a better price, then you could do it that way. So we're going to do English, Windows 10, 64, but you want to make sure you're doing 64-bit. Hit next, USB flash drive. So now you want to get your flash drive out. This is the one I'm using. And insert it into your computer. Okay, flash drive is inserted. And don't select any external hard drives if you have them connected. You don't want it to get formatted. We're going to select the USB here. Hit next. And now it's going to go ahead and download. Alright, now we're done. Windows 10 says that the USB flash drive is ready. And I'm going to plug in my USB into the back in one of the ports. There you go. It picked that up since we don't have anything installed. And we're seeing the Windows logo here. At this point, it should be pretty easy. Windows is really easy to install. It does take a little bit of time. It is quicker off of a USB drive than off of a disk or anything, and it's very, very simple to go through. So the languages, everything's standard. I'm going to hit install. Okay, so here's where you want to put in your product key. Now, if you don't have one or you want to do it later, you actually aren't forced to do it right away, But if you bought a version of Windows with a USB, you'll have one there, or if you have a previous build that you're replacing with this one, you can reuse it as long as you're not using it on the other computer. I'm going to hit I don't have a product key, and it should still go through, and I'll be able to enter that later. Now here you select which one. I'm just going to go with Home. Accept terms, and custom install. So we're not upgrading from like Windows 7 or 8 to 10, we're doing a custom install. Here's where you have to select your SSD. Now if you have multiple hard drives, you're going to have multiple ones come up, and you want to make sure you select the one that is your M.2. Now if you have 2 or 3 SSDs you want to use that are the same size, you just have to select one of them. And usually when I do a fresh setup, I like just having one drive plugged in. That way you can't mess anything up. And then once Windows is installed, you can plug in the other drives and format them in Windows. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this, and over here we're going to hit New, because it does have to format the drive to be able to install Windows on it. I'm going to select the full size. I don't want to split the hard drive in multiple areas, anything like that. So I'm going to hit Apply, hit OK. It's going to make different partitions. All right, so as you guys see, now there's 4 partitions. One's a recovery, a couple of really tiny ones that it uses for different things, and then we have the main 255 gig here. We're going to hit Next. And now it's basically a waiting game. It's going to go through, install all the files, get everything ready. So at this point, just wait, grab some coffee, a drink, whatever you want, take a break, and get back to it once it's done. All right, so we're here at the stage where we're going to select our options. You can use Express settings or customize it. So if you want to dig in and change different things, speech and the reporting that gets sent to Microsoft, you could do that. Just for the sake of this video, I'm going to select Express. All right, guys, so we're basically done here. We're at Windows, so everything's set up. The last thing that you really want to do and that I suggest doing is making sure Windows Update is set up on automatic. Now you're going to need internet for that, and if you use the Express setting, it should be set up as automatic, so it'll download everything, and some stuff can get installed. Other times they'll ask you to restart the computer, but you want to make sure you have all the latest safety patches and bug fixes, stuff like that. So you can either plug in your Ethernet or you can have like a Wi-Fi USB stick like this. So I'm going to use this right now, and almost all of them with Windows 10 will auto install and work out of the box. If not, you might have to use a disk drive or a USB if it comes with it, or a SD card, or worst case scenario, use another computer to download the latest driver for it, throw it on a USB like a flash drive, thumb drive, and then plug it in and install it. But I'm going to plug this here. I'm going to plug it in, and so right away it was instantly noticed, and now we have our Wi-Fi. Now most of the stuff is going to work out of the box. Windows is really good with installing your Ethernet and different things for the motherboard, and then it'll do the auto updates and installs. And you guys saw how easy that USB stick worked. Now I'm connected to the internet. Now the main thing that you want to make sure you do after you get set up is download the latest drivers for your graphics card. Windows is going to do a basic installation, but if you want to get like full acceleration, CUDA support if you're using an NVIDIA graphics card, and just the best performance, you want to make sure to do this. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this build guide. I hope it made it easier for you. If you have any questions, you guys can ask in that comment section below. Once again, I have all the parts listed in the description and in the comments section, so you guys can check that out. Of course, you can use different parts if you want, alternatives, different graphics cards, different RAM or more RAM, different hard drives. There's just so much customization that you can do when you build a computer yourself compared to just buying it from a system builder, and then you get to fine-tune it for your needs. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys want to see more videos like this one, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, and if you're not yet, if you don't have the notifications enabled, I definitely suggest enabling those so you guys don't miss out on future videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.